I've been driving long haul for 11 years, and I want to say up front, I am not the kind of man who tells stories like this. I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't watch horror movies. I don't sit around at truck stops swapping ghost stories with other drivers the way some guys do. That's just not me. I'm a practical person. I grew up in a practical family. I do a practical job. And the way I've always handled things that don't make sense is to find the part that does make sense and focus on that. So when I tell you that something ran alongside my truck for 60 miles on a Tuesday night in November, I need you to understand that I spent those 60 miles trying everything I know to explain it. I couldn't. The run was Amarillo to Albuquerque, a stretch of I-40 I've done probably 80 times, maybe more. I know that road the way I know my own driveway. Every curve, every mile marker, every point where the wind picks up off the mesa and starts pushing at the trailer. It's not a hard run. It's mostly flat, mostly straight, and at 11 p.m. on a weekday, it's nearly empty. You might see a handful of other trucks and maybe 2 or 3 passenger cars the whole way. I left Amarillo just after 10:30. Fuel topped off, log updated, coffee in the cup holder. Comfortable. Routine. It was around the 40-mile mark, somewhere past Adrian, where the road gets very flat and very dark, that I first noticed the light. On my passenger side, running alongside the truck, maybe 30 yards out into the desert, scrub off the shoulder. Not a steady light. It moved bobbing slightly, the way a carried light moves when someone is running. But I was doing 67 miles per hour, and whatever this was, it was keeping pace. I watched it for a few seconds and told myself, rancher on a quad bike, someone on ranch land running a fence line. A reflection, some trick of my own cab lights bouncing off something metallic out in the dark. I went through 4 explanations in about as many seconds, and I kept driving. The light stayed with me for the better part of 10 miles. Then it just stopped. Not faded, not drifted away, stopped. Like something that was running had simply stood still, and within a second or two I'd passed it and it was behind me and gone. I drove the next 20 miles telling myself it was a quad bike. I pulled into a rest area outside of Santa Rosa just past 1 a.m. I needed to stretch, use the facilities, and honestly, I just wanted to stand outside the truck for a few minutes and be in a place with lights. I parked, climbed down, walked around the back of the trailer to stretch my legs. And that's when I saw the scratch marks along the passenger side of the trailer, starting from around the front wheel well and running back maybe 15, 18 feet, were long parallel scratches in the aluminum siding, deep enough to catch the fluorescent light of the rest area, the kind of marks that have weight behind them, like something with real force had dragged something hard and sharp along the side of my moving truck. I stood there and looked at those marks for a long time. They were not there when I left Amarillo. I do a walk around before every run every single time. 11 years of doing it, and that trailer was clean when I pulled out. Something made those marks somewhere between Amarillo and Santa Rosa, at highway speed, running alongside me in the dark. I went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the November air. I took out my phone and photographed the scratches, and then I stood at the back of my trailer, looking out at the dark highway for a minute. And I want to be clear, I'm a large man. I have never been afraid of the dark, and I stood at the back of that trailer and I did not want to walk around to the passenger side. I made myself do it, but I didn't want to. Nothing there. Just the scrub and the dark and the wind. I filed a damage report at the next weigh station. Told them I might have sideswiped something, a sign, a barrier. I didn't know. I didn't tell them about the light. What would I say? I've shown those photos to 3 people since, and every one of them has had the same reaction. Silence first. Then they ask me what I think it was. I tell them I don't know. That's not me being coy. That's genuinely the truth. I don't know. What I do know is this. Those scratches ran the length of my passenger side in parallel lines, evenly spaced, angled slightly upward, the way they would angle if something was running at full stride and reaching up with one hand or whatever it used instead of a hand to drag along the side as it ran. 60 miles an hour through the New Mexico desert at 1 a.m., running, keeping up. I've done the Amarillo to Albuquerque run 4 times since then. And every single time when I hit that flat, dark stretch past Adrian, I keep my eyes on the road in front of me, not on the passenger side, not on whatever might be keeping pace out there in the dark. I need to say something before I get into this. I know what my instinct was that night, and I know I should have listened to it. And I'm going to tell you the whole thing honestly, including the parts where I made choices I wouldn't make again. My name is Rosa. I've been driving since I was 23. I'm 34 now, and I do a regular route between Phoenix and El Paso 3 times a week. I've been on that road so many times I could probably drive it with my eyes closed, which is a thing people say and probably shouldn't, but you understand what I mean. It's my road. I know it. 2 years ago, late October, I was running east on I-10, somewhere around the Wilcox stretch, which is a part of Arizona that is genuinely, completely empty. Nothing for miles in any direction, just desert and dark sky and the occasional glow of a phone tower way off in the distance. It was around 2 a.m. I came around a long curve and my headlights caught something in the road. A woman, standing in the right lane, not at the shoulder, not waving from the grass, standing in the lane, facing me. I hit the brakes hard enough to feel the trailer push. My heart was going before the truck had even stopped, and I pulled to the shoulder about 40 feet in front of her with my hazards going, hands shaking a little, just grateful I'd had enough distance. I sat there for a second, and then I looked in my mirrors. She was walking toward the truck. Now, here's the thing I want to be precise about, because this matters. My first instinct, in that first second, was to lock the door and call 911 and not open the window. That was my first instinct. I talked myself out of it because she was alone on a highway in the middle of the night in the desert, and she was clearly in some kind of distress, and I could not make myself drive away from that. She came to the passenger door. I cracked the window 2 inches and asked if she was okay. She said she was fine. Said her car had broken down about a mile back, said she'd been walking for 40 minutes trying to get signal. I asked where she was trying to get to. El Paso, she said, same direction I was heading. She asked if I could take her to the next town, just somewhere with a gas station or a phone. I should have stopped there and called someone else to come. I know that. I know that now. I unlocked the door. She climbed in, and I want to describe her because the details matter here. Early 30 seconds, maybe. Dark hair. No coat despite the desert. Cold at 2 a.m. A small bag on her shoulder. No phone in her hand. I said I'd take her to Wilcox, about 20 miles east. She said thank you and settled in, and I pulled back onto the highway. The first thing that was slightly wrong happened maybe 3 minutes in. I asked her what her name was, just conversation, the way you do, and she paused just a beat too long before she answered. Sandra, she said. Not a long pause, just half a second more than normal. The kind of pause that happens when someone is selecting an answer rather than retrieving one. I noticed it and said nothing. The second thing, I asked where her car had broken down, exactly had she been able to pull it off the road safely. She said yes, it was off to the right. I said I probably passed it then. What kind of car was it? She said a gray sedan. I had come around that curve with my lights on and seen nothing on the shoulder except her standing in the lane. There was no gray sedan or any sedan anywhere on that stretch. And I had been looking because that is what you do when someone's car is broken down. You look for the hazards. You look for the shape of the vehicle. There was nothing. I kept driving and I kept my voice even, and I didn't say any of that out loud. The third thing was the worst one. About 10 miles in, she turned and looked at me, not at the road, not at her phone, directly at me and said, "You almost didn't stop." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You slowed down first, and then you almost kept going." I had not almost kept going. I had hit the brakes and stopped. And the part where I'd sat in the truck and debated. The part where I'd thought about locking the door and calling 911. Instead, that had happened with the windows up and the doors closed. And this woman 40 feet behind me in the dark. There is no way she saw that. There is no way she knew that. I felt something drop in my chest that I'm not going to try to dress up with better language. It was fear, simple and direct and cold. I drove the remaining 10 miles to Wilcox without saying another word. And she didn't say anything either. She just sat there in the passenger seat with her small bag on her lap, watching the road. I pulled into the first gas station. I saw lights, cameras, another truck parked at the diesel pumps. And I stopped the truck and said, "This is as far as I can take you." She looked at me for a second. Then she climbed down without a word, closed the door, walked toward the gas station entrance, and I watched her in my mirror the whole way. She did not go inside. She walked around the side of the building, and she didn't come back out. I sat at that gas station for 40 minutes before I felt ready to drive again. I went inside and told the attendant there was a woman who'd gone around the side of the building, asked if she'd seen her. The attendant went and looked, came back and said there was nobody there, just the dumpsters and the dark. I drove the rest of the way to El Paso with every light in the cab on. The part I think about most is not the pause before the name, and it's not the car that wasn't there. It's the thing she said. "You almost didn't stop," because she was right. And she shouldn't have known that. And whatever she was doing, standing in the middle of that highway in the dark with no car and no coat and no phone, I think the right answer was the one my instinct gave me in the very first second. I think I should have kept the window closed. My name is Gil. I've been trucking since I was 26. I'm 52 now, so that's 26 years on the road. I've slept in my cab in 31 different states. I've driven through weather that shut down interstate highways. I've had 2 blowouts, 1 jackknife that I walked away from, and more close calls than I can count, honestly. I say all of that to tell you, I am not easily shaken. This shook me. It was a Thursday in late September, 2 years back. I was running a load of industrial equipment up from Charlotte to a distribution hub outside of Knoxville, a run I'd done maybe a dozen times before. Straightforward stuff. I-40 West, mountain sections, familiar road. I stopped at a truck stop outside of Asheville around 8 p.m. for dinner and fuel. Spent maybe 45 minutes inside, ate, used the phone, had coffee. When I came back out to the lot, I did my walk-around tires, lights, trailer connections, climbed back in, started the engine. I pulled out of the lot and got back on the highway. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the smell. Cigarette smoke in the cab. Fresh. Not old smoke soaked into the upholstery, fresh. The kind you smell when someone has been smoking in a closed space in the last few minutes. I don't smoke. Haven't in 8 years. I turned the air over, checked the vents, figured maybe it had drifted in from somewhere at the truck stop and caught in the cab. Told myself that, and mostly believed it, and kept driving. About an hour further west, I was into the mountain section by then. The road climbing and curving, not a lot of other traffic. I adjusted my mirrors at a straight stretch. The passenger side mirror, I reached up and tilted it slightly, and I saw the sleeper curtain move, just the edge of it. The curtain that separates the cab from the sleeper berth behind the seats, it moved. A slight shift, the way a curtain moves when air pressure changes, or when something on the other side of it shifts its weight. I sat with that for about 3 seconds. Then I said out loud to nobody, to the cab, just out loud, "Is someone back there?" Nothing. I told myself the curtain moved because I'd adjusted the mirror, that the movement of my arm had disturbed the air in the cab slightly. That made some sense. It was a thin curtain. It didn't take much. I kept driving, but I turned the radio off. Here's the thing about driving at night in the mountains. It demands your full attention. The curves come at you, the grades change, you're managing speed and gear and lane position constantly. I couldn't just stop. There was nowhere to pull over safely on that section of road, and if I'm being honest, completely honest, I didn't want to stop. Because if I stopped and opened that curtain and there was someone back there, I was in a very dark, very remote stretch of road with no other trucks in sight. So I made a deal with myself. Get to the next rest area, pull over, deal with it there. I drove. I drove for 22 more minutes. And for 22 minutes, I sat completely rigid in that seat, both hands on the wheel, listening to every sound the cab made. Every creak of the frame, every shift of the trailer, every noise that could have been normal and every noise that couldn't. I heard three things in those 22 minutes that I cannot assign to the truck. A soft sound, like an exhale. Once, around the 12-minute mark, the slight groan of the sleeping platform at around 17 minutes. The sound of weight redistributing on a surface. And at minute 20, just once, what I can only describe as the sound of a page turning. The rest area appeared on my right, and I swung in hard. I pulled to the far end of the lot, away from the other trucks, and I sat there for a full minute with my hands on the wheel and my heart doing something I didn't appreciate. Then I reached back and pulled the curtain open. Empty. The sleeper was empty. My bedding was where I'd left it. My bag was on the shelf. My spare jacket was hanging on the hook. Everything exactly as I'd left it when I'd closed it up before the Asheville stop. Empty. I climbed back there and checked every inch of it under the mattress, behind the bags, the storage compartments. Nothing, nobody, empty. I sat on the edge of the sleeping platform and looked at my hands for a while. I called my daughter when I got to Knoxville. I don't know exactly why, I just needed to hear a familiar voice. She asked how the run was. I said, fine. Here's what I've thought about in the 2 years since that night. When I came back out to the truck after dinner in Asheville, I did my walk around. I checked the tires, the lights, the trailer. I did not, and I'm thinking about this very carefully, I did not check the sleeper before I got back in. I never checked the sleeper. I've done this job for 26 years and I don't check the sleeper because I always know exactly what's in it because I'm the only one who ever goes in there. The truck stop in Asheville was busy that night. Maybe 40 trucks in the lot, drivers in and out of the diner, and I was inside for 45 minutes with my cab unlocked because I always leave it unlocked. Because I've been doing this job for 26 years and that has never mattered until maybe it mattered that night. Maybe someone climbed in while I was eating dinner and maybe they were back there for 20 minutes while I drove through the mountains. And maybe they slipped out while I was pulling into that rest area because I came in fast and loud and they had just enough warning. That's the rational explanation, and I believe it. Mostly. What I can't fully reconcile is the rest area. Because when I pulled in, I went straight to the far end of the lot away from other trucks. And when I opened that curtain, the cab door was still locked from the inside. Both doors. I always lock when I stop. That's habit. Both doors locked from inside. If someone was back there, how did they leave? I've driven past that Asheville truck stop a dozen times since. And every time, I lock the sleeper curtain from the cab side before I go in. Every single time. I don't care if it looks strange. I don't care if another driver sees me do it. Some habits you pick up from experience. And some habits you pick up because one night, in the dark in the mountains, something taught you that you needed them.